My name is Mark Benson, and I am 44 years old. Property manager in Austin, Texas. A man who once believed that quiet could fix almost anything. For most of my life, I lived by a simple code. Keep things in order and the noise will take care of itself. I thought love worked the same way, that if you made a home clean, safe, predictable, people would find peace inside it. 2 years ago, Laura moved in with her 2 children, Evan and Sophie. He was 20, already carrying the arrogance of a man who thinks the world owes him more than advice. She was 16, polite but distant, her eyes always on her phone, her laughter faintly cruel in the way only teenagers can make it. Laura had just crawled out of a hard divorce. She said her old apartment felt like a grave, full of echoes, too small for healing. I told her to bring her things here. I had space, a yard, stability. She said yes, and I mistook that yes for faith. At first, the house felt almost kind. Evan called me sir. Sophie smiled when I made breakfast. Laura walked barefoot through the kitchen like someone finally at peace. I believed in those small gestures, the illusion of family flickering in the corners like light through thin curtains. I set simple rules. Keep the house tidy. Tell me when friends are coming over, and respect each other's space. Nothing harsh. Just the sort of structure that keeps a home breathing. But peace has an expiration date. It started small. A missing screwdriver from the workshop, dishes left soaking for days, music bleeding through the walls at midnight. Things I could overlook if I tried hard enough. And I did. I told myself they were adjusting, that patience was a kind of investment. But then came the clutter. Piles of shoes at the door, cups left half full on the table, the faint smell of weed drifting from upstairs when they thought I'd gone to bed early. The house began to sound different. Doors closing faster. Laughter fading when I entered a room. Laura's voice quieter when she asked them to listen. There's a sound a home makes when respect starts to die. It's not shouting. It's silence. Long, deliberate silence that fills every space where trust used to live. I still remember the first time I noticed it fully. A Saturday morning, sunlight cutting across the living room. Sophie curled on the couch, scrolling through her phone. Evan came downstairs, shirtless, half awake, grabbed a beer from the fridge. I said, "It's 10 a.m. He looked at me, smiled without warmth and said, "Yeah, that was all. Just yeah." Something in that word told me everything I needed to know, the tone of a tenant, not a son. Laura pretended not to notice. Or maybe she noticed too much and didn't want to face it. Either way, the balance was gone. I could feel it. The quiet fracture spreading through every room, invisible but certain. Every evening followed the same ritual. Laura would cook something half-hearted, usually pasta or frozen chicken. The kids would appear, headphones in, faces lit blue by their screens. Conversation was optional, gratitude extinct. I'd ask about their days. Sophie would shrug. Evan would grunt. Laura would fill the silence with something cheerful. A story about work, a neighbor, the weather. Anything to distract from the emptiness sitting between us. Sometimes, after dinner, I'd walk through the house and see what they left behind. Half-empty soda cans on the counter. Towels on the floor. Muddy footprints up the stairs. Every trace a reminder that this was no longer my home. Just a place I maintained for people who didn't look back when they left the room. I started keeping track of the small things that vanished. A wrench, a flashlight, a set of earbuds, $20 from my desk drawer. None of it worth fighting over, yet each loss felt deliberate, like pieces of respect quietly stolen. When I mentioned it to Laura, she brushed it off. "They're good kids, Mark. They're just young. They'll come around." But coming around never happened. Instead, they drifted further, into their rooms, their phones, their own private universes where I was just background noise. Sometimes I'd hear Evan laughing through his door, loud and careless, the kind of laugh that used to mean freedom but now just sounded like defiance. I'd stand in the hallway, listening, realizing I didn't belong to the sound of my own house. And yet I kept giving. I kept trying. I bought Sophie new art supplies for school, helped Evan fix his car, covered their phone bills when Laura's checks came late. I told myself that responsibility was love in disguise, that giving was the only language some people understood. But giving without gratitude turns love into labor. And I was tired of working alone. One evening, I came home to find the front door unlocked, the porch light off, and the living room dark. The air smelled faintly of smoke and spilled beer. I turned on the lamp and saw a stain on the carpet, small, circular, faint but undeniable. No one mentioned it later. That was the first night I sat in the dark, long after everyone went to bed, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the quiet rhythm of the house breathing without me. It's strange how a place can reject you without ever saying a word. Laura slept easily beside me that night. I didn't. I stared at the ceiling and thought about the years I'd spent building other people's homes, fixing leaks, painting walls, repairing foundations, while my own was quietly crumbling. Respect, I've learned, isn't lost in arguments. It erodes through neglect, one ignored word, one unacknowledged effort, one boundary crossed and left unrepaired. By the time I realized how deep the cracks ran, the damage was already done. Evan stopped coming home on weekends, saying he was staying with friends. Sophie grew sharper, quicker with sarcasm. Her laughter now a wee *p* and aimed just beneath the skin. And Laura, she grew quiet in the way people do when they start keeping two truths. The one they live and the one they're too afraid to say out loud. Sometimes she'd look at me across the table like she wanted to speak, but the moment would pass. Maybe she was tired. Maybe she was guilty. Or maybe she'd simply chosen her silence. That's how families fall apart. Not with shouting, but with surrender. I told myself it was temporary. That trust could be rebuilt. That I could outlast the distance between us. But every night, when I turned off the lights, I could feel the house exhale. Like it was relieved to be left alone. I stopped playing music. Stopped cooking the big meals I used to make on weekends. The laughter that once came easy now sounded forced, rehearsed. Even my footsteps seemed unwelcome. By late summer, the house felt colder. Not in temperature, but in spirit. The air carried a kind of weight that pressed against me every time I came home. I'd park the car, sit there for a minute, staring at the front door, and wonder how something meant to shelter could start to feel like a punishment. It's easy to say you saw it coming, that the signs were obvious. But when you're inside it, the slow decay feels like normal life. You tell yourself that tomorrow will be different, that they'll notice the effort, that gratitude will arrive like rain after drought. But it doesn't. It never does. The truth is, by the time a man realizes he's losing his place in a family, the eviction's already happened in silence. That's where I was, sitting in a house full of people, listening to laughter that didn't include me, and pretending it was enough. That's where trust began to fade. Not in a single moment, but over 100 small ones that no one remembers but me. And that's where the story really starts. Labor Day weekend. That's when it all came undone. The heat in Austin was unbearable that year, the kind that turns air into a slow punishment. I was working overtime at one of the complexes I manage, a late-night maintenance call that dragged into morning. Pipes had burst in Building C, flooding half the ground floor. I remember leaving the house just before 9, looking back once through the rearview mirror. The porch light was off. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Before I left, I told them not to bring anyone over. Just that simple rule. No parties. No guests. Keep it peaceful. Laura had nodded distractedly. Sophie waved without looking up from her phone, and Evan had muttered, "Yeah, sure." I believed them. That was my mistake. Around midnight, my phone buzzed with a security alert from the smart doorbell camera. Movement detected. I ignored it. I told myself it was the wind, or maybe a raccoon on the porch. I was too tired, too drenched in the chemical smell of flood water to care. But when I drove home at 4 in the morning, exhaustion humming in my bones, I saw the first sign that something was wrong. The porch light still off. The door half open. A low hum of music coming from inside, bass trembling through the walls. For a moment, I just sat there in the car, engine idling, staring at that half-open door. There's a silence that comes before realization, a quiet so sharp it almost whistles in your ears. When I stepped inside, the smell hit first, Beer, smoke, sweat, and something sour. The kind of smell that tells you respect has left the room hours ago. The living room was chaos. Couch overturned. Coffee table on its side. The floor sticky with spilled drinks and cheap perfume. Empty bottles lined the windowsills like trophies. Someone had drawn something obscene on the whiteboard I kept near the office door. The TV remote was gone. The air was heavy, humid with the ghosts of laughter. There was a burn mark on the armrest of the leather chair my father built before he died. A black, perfect circle like a bullet hole. My chest went cold. I moved deeper into the house, each step deliberate, my boots sticking to the floor. The kitchen looked worse. Trash overflowing, cigarette butts floating in the sink, the faint buzz of a fly circling the mess. I opened the fridge. Half the food was gone. The rest was warm. Upstairs, the smell was worse. A blend of cologne, beer, and teenage arrogance. The hallway lights were still on. Evan's door stood wide open. Inside, clothes littered the floor. A half-empty bottle of vodka sat on his desk, surrounded by red plastic cups. The window was cracked open, curtains fluttering like slow applause. Sophie's room looked like a hurricane had passed through it. Glitter on the floor. A stranger's jacket on the bed. My stomach turned. In my office, the door was ajar. I pushed it open and froze. The drawers were pulled out, papers scattered across the floor. My laptop was gone. So was the small safe I kept under the desk. The family camera, vintage old something I'd inherited, gone too. For a long time, I didn't move. I just stood there, feeling my pulse crawl through my throat. Then I turned to the security monitor and replayed the footage. The video was grainy, but the truth doesn't need high definition. Around 10 p.m., a line of cars pulled up along the curb. Teenagers spilled out. Strangers, loud, laughing, holding beer cases and speakers. Evan appeared among them, baseball cap backward, grinning like he owned the place. Sophie followed, hair tied up, laughing with two older boys. They didn't sneak. They arrived. By 11, the house was full. Bodies everywhere. People dancing on the furniture. Someone was smoking in the kitchen. A boy I'd never seen was waving my hammer around like a joke. I watched as Sophie poured drinks for a group sitting on the staircase. My staircase. Evan was at the center of it all, arms around a girl, shouting over the music. Then came the part that hollowed me out completely, the moment the office door opened. 3 strangers stepped inside, drinks in hand, laughing as they picked through my drawers. One of them lifted my camera, pointed it at the others, and took a photo. Flash. Another grabbed the safe, testing the weight. Then they left, laughing. Not once did Evan stop them. Not once did Sophie speak up. I watched the rest of the footage until the screen filled with static. Each second chipped something off the man I thought I was. When it ended, I just stood there, staring at the black monitor. I couldn't even summon anger, just a deep, ringing emptiness. I spent the next hour walking through the wreckage with my phone, taking photographs, stains on the carpet, broken plates, beer cans, cigarette burns. Every image felt like evidence of something greater than vandalism. It was betrayal made visible. At 5 a.m., I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by silence and debris. The sun was starting to rise, pale and indifferent, bleeding through the blinds. That light always used to make the house feel alive. That morning, it just made the damage visible. Evan came home around 5:30, alone. He walked in like nothing was wrong. Hair matted, eyes glazed, shirt inside out. He froze when he saw me sitting there, the photos spread out like a crime scene. "What the hell happened?" he asked, as if he were the victim. I didn't answer. I just turned the phone toward him, showing him the footage paused on his face. His smile, his beer, his laughter. His mouth opened, then closed. "Mom's gonna K***l me," he muttered. "No," I said quietly. "She's not. I am." He tried to laugh it off. "It's just a party." "Just a party?" I said. "Look around. Look at what's left." He looked, but not really. His eyes skimmed the mess the way a thief checks a pocket after the crime's already done. "Relax," he said finally. It's not a big deal. I'll clean it up. I stood slowly. You didn't just wreck a house, Evan. You wrecked trust. That's harder to clean. Sophie appeared at the top of the stairs then, hair tangled, mascara streaked. She froze when she saw me. The smell of smoke followed her. Go to your room, I said. My voice was calm, too calm. She obeyed without a word. Evan lingered a second longer, maybe expecting forgiveness, maybe too drunk to know what to expect. When I didn't speak, he went upstairs too. By the time Laura called later that morning, the evidence was already gathered: photos, security clips, inventory lists, the police report I'd filed. Her voice on the phone was small, uncertain. She was in Seattle for a business trip, hundreds of miles away, safe from the wreckage. Mark, please don't do anything rash, she said. They're just kids. No, I said. They're choices with legs. She cried. Promised to fix it. Said she'd talk to them, said she'd make it right. But nothing she said could touch what I'd seen. When the call ended, I looked around the living room. The stains, the overturned couch, the empty bottles catching light like broken glass confessionals. This was the night everything changed. Not because of what they did, but because of what I realized. Trust doesn't vanish in chaos. It dies in laughter, the kind that happens while you're not home. The house I'd built for peace had become a crime scene for carelessness. And for the first time, I saw clearly that I was just the landlord, not the father. The man who owned the walls, not the hearts inside them. The sun climbed higher, spilling gold across the wreckage. I sat there, watching the light touch everything I tried to protect, and felt something final settle in my chest. A quiet decision. By the next sunrise, I would no longer be the man they mistook for a doormat. By morning, the house looked emptied of life, though no one had left yet. The air carried the heavy stillness that follows a storm, that strange, exhausted quiet when even apology feels pointless. I spent the first hours cleaning, not out of forgiveness, but to reclaim the space. Each broken glass and sticky counter felt like an autopsy on trust. I gathered everything: photos, footage, receipts, police report, into a single folder and sent it to Laura. She was still in Seattle, safely removed from what her children had done. I didn't expect an immediate response, but silence stretched longer than I'd imagined. When she finally called, her voice was thin, uncertain. Mark, they made a mistake. Please don't call the police. They're scared. I could hear movement behind her, the muffled sound of an airport terminal. The world was still turning for her, while mine had stopped. I already did, I said. You should see what they did to this place. Mark, I'm not angry, I cut in. Not anymore. Anger needs energy. I'm empty, she cried then, softly, but distance made it sound like static. That day, I stayed home from work. I needed to witness what brokenness looked like in daylight. Sunlight has a cruel honesty. It doesn't hide the stains or the dents. It exposes them. Evan and Sophie came downstairs mid-morning, both wearing the same expression. Guilt without ownership. Sit, I said. They sat at the table across from me, eyes fixed anywhere but mine. You had a party, I said flatly. You stole from me. You let strangers destroy this house. Do you have any idea what that means? Evan spoke first. We'll fix it. How? He hesitated. I'll pay for what's missing. With what money? I asked. The money that comes from me? He looked down. Sophie's eyes filled, but she didn't speak. You both took something from me that I can't replace, I said quietly. Not the camera. Not the laptop. Trust. You burned that. And I don't rebuild what people keep setting on fire. Sophie started crying. Evan muttered something about it being just a mistake. I stood, walked to the office, and returned with a printed list. Every item stolen or damaged. Every cost documented down to the cent. $2,300, I said. That's what it cost to learn what respect means. Evan's jaw tightened. We'll figure it out. I nodded once. You should. By afternoon, Laura called again. She was trying to reason with me. They're young, she said. They didn't understand. They're adults, I interrupted. Old enough to drink, to drive, to lie. Old enough to face consequences. Please, she whispered. We can fix this. No, Laura, I said. We can't. I was the only one trying. The call ended with silence. That week crawled by in slow fragments. I repaired what I could. Replaced the locks. Bought a new laptop, though it felt like admitting defeat. Every evening, Evan and Sophie sat in their rooms, avoiding me. Their doors closed like barricades. Then, on Friday, the police called. They'd recovered some of my missing tools at a pawn shop downtown. The clerk gave a name. Evans. The report said he'd sold them for cash and marijuana. I read it twice, each word colder than the last. When Laura came back 3 days later, she found me in the kitchen. The police paperwork spread across the table like a confession I hadn't written but still had to sign. Her eyes filled before I even spoke. He told me he borrowed them, she whispered. He lied, I said. He's good at it. He learned it from someone. She flinched. That's not fair. It's the only fair thing left. She sat down across from me. Her hands were shaking. What do you want me to do? Leave, I said. Take them. I can't live with them. And I can't live with you pretending this isn't what it is. She looked up sharply. Mark. I tried, I said. God knows I did. I treated them like my own. I fixed their cars, paid their tuition, gave them everything they needed. And every time I asked for something small, respect, honesty, decency, they handed me silence. I'm done being the man who funds his own disrespect. She wiped her eyes, breathing unevenly. You're angry. You don't mean that. I met her gaze. No. I'm finally saying what I've meant for months. The rest of the day unfolded like a quiet evacuation. She packed slowly, crying softly. The kids avoided my eyes. I didn't shout, didn't slam doors. There's no point in noise when something's already dead. By evening, the house was half empty. Boxes lined the hall. The air smelled of dust and endings. Sophie came to me once, hesitant, her voice shaking. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't mean for it to get so bad. I wanted to believe her. I almost did. But apologies without change are just words trying to sound like redemption. Take care of your mother, I said. That was all. She nodded and left. Evan never said a word. When the front door closed behind them, the sound was both final and merciful. I stood in the silence for a long time, then turned off every light in the house. The quiet that followed wasn't loneliness. It was relief. For weeks after, I lived like a man walking through ruins. Every sound echoed. Every room felt too big. But slowly order returned. The walls stopped absorbing tension. The air grew lighter. I mowed the lawn, replaced the broken chair leg, patched the holes in the drywall. Simple things. Acts of repair that required no forgiveness. People talk about heartbreak like it's loud, shouting, tears, chaos. They're wrong. Real heartbreak is quiet. It's the sound of your own voice disappearing from the lives of people you loved, and realizing no one noticed. Laura called once more before moving out completely. She said she didn't want it to end like this. I said it already had. When I hung up, I sat on the porch as the sun went down, the sky bruised and beautiful, and thought about the man I'd been 2 years ago. Hopeful, patient, certain that good intentions could build a family. Now I knew better. A man can give everything. His time, his labor, his faith, and still be treated like a stranger in his own home. Because some families don't want saving. They just want the comfort of being carried until the carrier collapses. That was me, until I finally stopped carrying. When night fell, the house settled into a silence I hadn't heard in months. Not angry, not waiting, just still. It was the sound of peace returning, one room at a time. Months passed. The calendar folded into quiet repetition. Mornings became identical. Black coffee, one slice of toast, the same long pause at the kitchen table before work. The house had regained its rhythm. Not lively, not joyful, but calm. The kind of calm that feels earned through suffering. I thought often about what had been said, what had been broken. The silence that once felt suffocating had turned into a kind of companion. It didn't accuse. It didn't demand. It just existed, steady as breath. The first time Laura came back, it was a rainy Sunday, the kind of day that makes even forgiveness sound impossible. When I opened the door, she looked smaller, her eyes hollow from too many sleepless nights. She didn't step inside at first. She just stood there under a gray sky, clutching an envelope. "Evan wanted you to have this," she said. Her voice trembled on the word wanted. I let her in. The air smelled of wet asphalt and old perfume. She sat at the table, the same table where I'd once laid out the photos of that night. The same place where everything had come apart. She slid the envelope across to me. Inside was a check for $1,000, signed in her handwriting but written on his account. Beside it was a small velvet pouch. I loosened the drawstrings and felt metal against my palm. My father's old compass. I hadn't even realized it was missing until that moment. Laura said softly, "He found it in his backpack. He didn't know it was yours. He wanted to return it himself, but he thought you wouldn't see him." She looked up then, waiting for something in my face. Anger, relief, maybe the faint shadow of forgiveness. I gave her none of it, only silence. "He's working now," she continued, "at a car wash, saving up. He's different." "Different?" I repeated, though the word felt like a lie we both needed. She nodded quickly, wiping her eyes. "Sophie started therapy. She wanted me to tell you she's sorry." Sorry, that word again. Always arriving too late, always asking to rewrite history. I set the compass on the table and turned it so the needle pointed north. "They'll be fine," I said. "They have their father. They have you." She flinched. "We don't have each other, Mark. Not anymore." The rain outside grew heavier, drumming against the windows like applause for endings. "I didn't come to fix anything," she whispered. "I just wanted to tell you they're trying." I nodded once. Trying is good. When she left, she paused at the doorway and looked around the house. The neat counters, the polished floors, the faint smell of lemon cleaner. "It looks different," she said. "It is," I replied. After she left, I held the compass for a long time, turning it over in my hands. My father had used it when I was a boy, hiking through woods, measuring direction by instinct and trust. He'd once told me that a compass doesn't change. It only tells you what you already forgot to see. I placed it on the shelf beside the family photos. The only one left hanging was of me and my father, taken years before he died. The others, Laura, the kids, the smiling illusions, were packed away in a box in the attic. Weeks passed. I went to work, came home, and began to understand something about peace. It isn't the absence of others. It's the absence of pretending. Then, one evening, a letter arrived. The handwriting was uncertain, jagged, like someone forcing words out through guilt. It was from Sophie. She wrote about the chair. The one my father had built, the one with the cigarette burn. She'd had it repaired, she said. Paid for it herself with her first paycheck from a cafe job. She included a photo. The leather restored, the wood polished, the faint scar still visible beneath the light. "I didn't want to erase it completely," she wrote. "I wanted it to remind me." I read that line again and again. For the first time, the word sorry felt like it had weight. Later, Evan began sending small payments. $20, then $50, sometimes $100, always through transfer, never with words attached. No message, no apology. Just numbers arriving like slow confessions. Each time, I'd stare at the alert on my phone and feel a strange quiet pride. Not in the money, but in the act itself. Repayment isn't forgiveness, but it's something close to honesty. A year passed. Seasons changed without ceremony. I stopped checking the mailbox expecting anything from them. Peace had become my new currency. Quiet mornings, steady work, the house breathing evenly again. Sometimes, when the wind moved through the trees outside, I could almost imagine voices. Laughter that wasn't cruel, footsteps that didn't echo. The ghosts of a family I tried to build. But ghosts don't haunt you unless you invite them. And I had learned not to. Still, every now and then, I'd catch sight of that burn mark on the armrest of my father's chair. The repair was almost perfect, Yet the shadow remained, a dark reminder under the varnish. I could have sanded it out, hired someone to make it disappear, but I left it there on purpose. A mark like that tells a story better than forgiveness ever could. It reminds me of what trust costs. It reminds me that kindness without boundaries becomes permission. It reminds me that peace isn't free. It's rebuilt, slowly, from the ruins of disappointment. Sometimes, late at night, I sit in that chair with the compass in my hand and trace the needle's slow movement. It never wavers, no matter how long I stare. Always north, always constant. I think about Laura then, about the look in her eyes when she realized the damage couldn't be undone. About the kids, older now, maybe wiser, carrying the memory of what they broke. I don't hate them. I don't forgive them either. I've simply accepted the truth. Some debts are paid in silence, not in words. The house is quiet again. Clean. Predictable. Mine. When people visit, they say it feels peaceful here. They don't hear what I hear. The faint echo beneath that peace. The quiet hum of something learned the hard way. The lesson is simple, though it took years to earn. Love that demands blindness isn't love at all. And a home built on one man's endurance is just another kind of prison. So now, when I wake, I thank the silence. I pour my coffee, open the windows, and let the morning in. The compass stays where it is, pointing north. The burn mark stays too. Proof that damage can be mended, but never erased. Was I wrong to walk away from them? Or was I only doing what every man eventually must? Protecting the part of himself that still remembers how to stay whole. I don't know. But when I close my eyes and listen to the quiet, the answer feels less like regret and more like direction.